Welcome everyone. Welcome everyone in the US, Israel, Palestine, and other places in the world. The name and the topic of today's webinar is the Israel-Hamas War and International Law. This is the latest in the series of webinars that Partners for Progressive Israel produces called Conversations with Israel and Palestine. My name is Ron Skolnick. I organize this series for Partners for Progressive Israel. I'm just going to take a moment before handing things over to today's panel to let you know that Partners for Progressive Israel is an American not-for-profit. It is dedicated to the achievement of a durable and just peace between Israel and its neighbors, and that includes, of course, an end to Israel's occupation. Partners supports Israelis working to ensure social justice, civil rights, Jewish-Arab partnership, and equality for all of Israel's inhabitants. The organization seeks to deepen Americans' understanding of Israel's and Palestine's complexities so they can better advocate for a progressive future for all inhabitants of the region. Partners for Progressive Israel is glad to be bringing this webinar to all of you for free. If you enjoy it and want more programming like it, please visit progressiveisrael.org and make whatever contribution you feel appropriate. Before introducing today's panel, a quick note about upcoming programming that you might find of interest. On Sunday, December 3rd, the last two sessions of the 2023 winter component of the Israel-Palestine symposium that Partners produces every year will take place. This is a virtual discussion, and the two sessions will deal with a shared society within the Green Line, and we'll focus on issues of economic and political disparity between Jewish and Arab citizens of Israel, the Arab Lives Matter movement, and other questions. So that's on Sunday, December 3rd. One quick note, the chat is open for conversation amongst audience members. The chat, however, is not where you should be posing questions. There's a Q&A button. Please use that as the panel won't be monitoring the chat for your questions, so questions in the Q&A. Okay, let me now introduce our panel in brief and hand things over to them, which is what you're waiting for. Professor Michael Walzer is Professor Emeritus of Social Science at the Institute for Advanced Study in Princeton, New Jersey. As a professor, author, editor, and lecturer, Walzer has addressed a wide variety of topics in political theory and moral philosophy, and those include just and unjust war, nationalism, ethnicity, political obligation. His books include Just and Unjust Wars, Spheres of Justice, Thick and Thin, Moral Argument at Home and Abroad, and many more. And his books and essays have played a part in the revival of practical, issue-focused ethics and the development of a pluralist approach to political and moral life. Walzer served for more than 3 decades as co-editor of Dissent magazine. He's currently working on the 4th volume of The Jewish Political Tradition, which is a comprehensive collaborative project focused on the history of Jewish political thought. And his book, A Foreign Policy for the Left, was published in 2018. Michael Sfard is an Israeli human rights lawyer specializing in international human rights law and the laws of war, with a special emphasis on the law of belligerent occupation. He serves as legal advisor to several Israeli human rights and humanitarian organizations and peace groups, and those include Yesh Din, Breaking the Silence, and Peace Now, Shalom Akshav. He also represents Palestinian communities and Israeli and Palestinian activists and advises international human rights and humanitarian NGOs. Sfard also serves as a commissioner on the International Commission of Jurists and is a non-resident fellow at the nonprofit Democracy for the Arab World Now, or the acronym DAWN. Sfard has authored several books, including The Wall and the Gate, Israel-Palestine and the Legal Battle for Human Rights. He graduated from the Faculty of Law at Hebrew University and received his LLM in International Human Rights Law from University College of London. Our moderator today is Emily Schaeffer Omer-Man. She is an Israeli-American human rights attorney with more than 15 years experience representing Palestinian litigants before Israeli courts, as well as international tribunals. Until 2017, she was of counsel at the Michael Sfard Law Office, where she served as legal director of Yesh Din's Security Forces Accountability Project, representing victims of killing, injury, and other crimes committed by Israeli soldiers, police, and settlers. Alongside Michael Sfard, she successfully litigated challenges to the IDF's use of white phosphorus in successive Gaza military campaigns, and represented the village of Bil'in in the West Bank in challenging the wall and settlements. In 2018, she founded a nonprofit law practice focused on corporate accountability for complicity in Palestinian human rights abuses. Schaeffer Omer-Man is an adjunct professor at American University and is regularly invited to lecture and comment on the application of international law to Israel's occupation. With that, I will hand things over to Emily Schaeffer Omer-Man and our panel. I'll be joining you at the end to say thank you. I hope you find it enriching and educating webinar. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ron. And good morning or evening or afternoon to all of our audience members. And thank you to Partners for Progressive Israel for inviting me back to moderate another great conversation with two esteemed colleagues. I have to give full disclosure, which is that this is, well, an especially great pleasure for me today because I'm with not only my former boss and longtime mentor, a dear friend, Michael Sfard, but also a professor whose work I have followed closely and whose perspective on moral and political aspects of the work that I do has really helped to shape some of that work. So thank you, Professor Walzer. It is not lost on me, as I'm sure it's not lost on the rest of the audience, that both of your names are Michael or Michael. So I hope that it's okay if I address questions to Michael W. and Michael S. For ease. Is that all right? All right. Wonderful. So we have a lot to cover today, so I want to dive straight in. I'm sure that most of our audience members are glued to the news and don't need a lot of background, but just to make sure we're all sort of oriented on what we're going to be discussing today. We are, of course, talking about the most recent hostilities, which began on October 7th, when Hamas broke through the fence between the Gaza Strip and Israel proper, killing around 1,400 Israelis, most of whom were civilians, also abducting and taking hostage upwards of 240 Israelis and taking them back into Gaza. Since then, there have been regular mortars or rockets fired into Israel. In fact, just as a warning, our guest, Michael S., may need to abruptly leave and come back to this discussion because rockets are still landing even where he is in Tel Aviv, 6.5 weeks into the war. And of course, the northern border has also been active, particularly with Hamas militants that are based in Lebanon, firing into northern Israel. In response, Israel began a campaign, first of high numbers of airstrikes, followed by an evacuation or forced evacuation of the north of Gaza of around 1 million people, among the 2.2 million Gazans who live in the Strip, and issued a complete siege on Gaza. And you might recall Defense Minister Gallant saying no food, no water, no electricity, no fuel. And since then, some humanitarian aid has come in, but the situation is quite dire in terms of all of those needs. And the death toll is now upwards of 13,000, where it's believed that around 8,000 of those are civilians, and reports are that 5,500 among those who've been killed are children. I am going to leave most of the international legal analysis and discussion for our guests and perhaps the three of us. But I just want to give us a really basic orientation so we can have this discussion and remind all of our audience what we're talking about when we say international law in this context, right? Today's question is, what does international law have to say about all of what has happened over the past 6.5 weeks and perhaps even before? And what we mean is the laws of war. And those are some of the oldest sets of international law and international legal thinking that exist. And they even predate the codification, at least, of human rights law. And there are both provisions, obligations that parties in power, parties at war or armies at war have, duties that they have towards each other and towards civilians, and also powers that they have that they are able to execute when in war. And one of the most important rules is the principle of distinction. And that is the principle that military targets are to be distinguished from civilians. So this means fighters, combatants, members of armed groups and armies are legitimate military targets, whereas civilians are not to be targeted. And the same goes for property, right? Sometimes we call these objects, military objects, civilian objects. And that's especially true when we're talking about schools and hospitals, which have extra protections, places of cultural significance. This equation, unfortunately, never boils down to only militants or combatants killed and civilians and their homes and property preserved. And the calculation often feels very cold, and something that I think it'll be interesting to talk about, particularly with you, Michael W., professor. But where the morality comes into this equation. But the bottom line is that where there is a military necessity for conducting an attack or a military maneuver, a calculation needs to be made about whether the loss of life that is predicted, loss of civilian life or damage to civilian property that is predicted, this is an ex ante, a forward-looking analysis, is proportionate to the military advantage to be achieved. And it's a complex analysis, but its ultimate goal is supposed to be to cause the least amount of harm to civilians while achieving the war's goals. I want to move into the questions that I have for the two of you, but laying out that background so that we have some of the terminology. So first, I'll turn to you, Michael S. And I would like you to help us sort of diagnose some of the any major international law violations. Again, we're looking at IHL, laws of war, international humanitarian law that we have seen over the past month and a half. And if I may, I'd like to put the actions of Hamas and the IDF into 4 major categories for you. So the first would be the killing and inhumane treatment of civilians. The second would be abduction of civilians and holding them hostage. Third, destruction of property, including schools and hospitals, as I mentioned. And 4 would be the siege of Gaza, either all of it or part of it. Can you tell us what in these categories you see as violations?
Well, thank you. And just to take 1 second to say thank you for organizing this to Partners for Progressive Israel. It's really a pleasure to be here with Professor Walzer and with you, Emily. It's an old friend of mine. International laws of war are not primarily meant for lawyers. They are primarily meant for soldiers, for combatants, for officers. And that is why I tend to say, when I am asked about violations of the laws of war from people who are, you and I will call them laymen, that are not lawyers, that intuition should play a very good role in understanding what's illegal and what's legal, what's immoral and what's moral. And I think when we look at what happened on October 7th, I think all of us, in our heart of hearts, in our bellies, we know that we were seeing crimes against humanity. I'm not talking about the legal classification of that specific type of crimes. Crimes against humanity is a type of international crimes. But I'm talking about a crime against anything that is human. Killing systematically civilians, children, babies, women, men, elder people who are defenseless and who are civilians is a crime. And doing it on a systematic fashion, as we know the Hamas militants have done, is a crime. And shooting rockets at civilian centers with an aim to cause as much damage as possible to civilians and civilian objects is a crime, is a war crime. And hiding and assimilating in civilian, among civilians, and exposing them to the risks of war. This is a violation, a very clear and fundamental violation of the principle of distinction. The principle of distinction has two sides. One is that combatants are not allowed to point their guns to civilians of the enemy, but the other is that they have to distinguish themselves from their own civilians so as not to put their civilians at peril. So I think when we talk about Hamas, we're seeing many, not just actions, but practices that are definitely violations of the laws of war, of the very fundamental principles that you have just mentioned, the principle of distinction, the principle of proportionality, and one more that is even less being mentioned usually, the obligation to take precautionary measures, even when you are targeting legitimate targets, even when you are expected that the result will be proportional. Even then, you must choose the weapons, you must choose the means of warfare in a way that would minimize the damage to civilians. I don't want to get too much to it, maybe we'll talk about it later, but I would like to invoke the word genocide here. And I'm not saying that genocide has been committed by the Hamas, but I'm saying this is this is something that we should not rule out. If indeed the Hamas militants have had a plan and they got orders to butcher Israelis on a systematic fashion and annihilate communities in the Gaza envelope, I think if that was the intention, to annihilate Israeli communities and a cluster of communities, that could really amount to the crime of genocide, because that means that they wanted to physically destroy a distinctive part of a group, the group being Israelis, the part of it being the communities around the Gaza Strip. So that's with the Hamas. I can keep on because I have a long list of things that I think of violations that the Hamas has been engaging in, not just from not beginning in October 7th. Let us remind the listeners and the viewers that the International Criminal Court is investigating all kinds of suspicions that Hamas and other Palestinian militant groups have engaged in war crimes. When it comes to Israel, here I have to say the following. I have loads of suspicions and loads of concerns. But while I know what happened, I feel I know enough on what happened on October 7th And enough to make a call to say that there were violations and severe violations. I think when it comes to the Israeli operation and the Israeli war, there are many, many very difficult questions and many, many suspicions of violations, but I think I don't have enough information, enough evidence, because at the end of the day, the law follows the facts and not the other way around. So I'll give a few. First of all, we're watching a campaign, a war campaign that has completely annihilated, destroyed big residential areas. Homes of people, commercial areas, clinics, schools. The north is almost wiped out, the north of the Gaza Strip. That begs the question, was there an intentional targeting of civilians or civilian objects? And I can't answer that because the question is, what was the aim? Why each and every target was targeted? What was the information that led the Israeli military to decide to target these places? And the same thing when it comes to proportionality. The numbers you have mentioned are horrendous. 13,000 people dead, 8,000 of them civilians, 5,000 of them minors. This is catastrophic. In and of itself, it is not a proof that the attack was disproportionate. It definitely shifts the burden for the IDF to explain how we got to this situation. And I'll give one example, and I'll stop here because too much time has been taken. But I know, for example, on one case, there was one bombing of Jabalia refugee camp. About 50 or 60 civilians were killed in that attack. An IDF spokesperson was interviewed by Wolf Blitzer on CNN. He confirmed that they knew, the army knew that there were civilians there. And he also said that the target was a Hamas brigadier commander. If that is true, then this is for me a textbook case of disproportional attack. If the target was a commander of a small area within the Gaza Strip, and knowingly they have killed 60 or 70 people, that's for me a disproportionate attack. So every bomb, and there were thousands of them, has to be scrutinized this way, to ask the IDF, why did you target this? What were the expectations? What did you know about civilian potential casualties? And that's how we measure it. And the last thing I want to say is about forcible transfer. We saw the Israeli army. I am an Israeli. We have coercively transferred more than 1 million people from their homes and their neighborhoods of north of Gaza to the south. Israel has never provided an assurance that they will be allowed back. I don't know why no one talks about it, but no one in the Israeli government or the Israeli army has made a clear statement saying, once the war is over, once military actions end, you will be allowed to go back. That is very frightening, because if that is the case, and Israel is not allowing them to go back, or thinking of not allowing them to go back, that's a crime against humanity of forcible transfer. And also, the alibi for coercing them to leave their neighborhoods is to take precautionary measures, to let the people go from area we know is going to be a war zone, to protect them. But you cannot push more than 1 million people away without making sure that the place where they're going to is a safe haven, where they can get all the humanitarian needs for survival. And Israel not only forcibly transferred them, but also sealed the borders. And the statement you mentioned by the Israeli Minister of Defense, no water, no food, no water, no fuel, is a horrendous statement that suggests a tactic of starvation, which is again a war crime. So the question of how much humanitarian assistance is allowed in, and is it enough for the people who are moved, is crucial in order for us to assess the Israeli actions in light of international laws of war. I have more, but I'll stop here.
Thank you so much. I want to pick up on a couple of threads and move to you now, Professor Michael W. First of all, I want to thank you, Michael S., for mentioning the concept of not only an attack, not only having to be proportionate, but also to use the least harmful means to achieve the same military target, military objective. And this is something that I think is lost on a lot of politicians and scholars who are discussing what's happening right now. It's not enough for an attack to be proportionate. It needs to also be the least harmful, to cause the least amount of civilian harm. You also mentioned that it's a war crime to wage war from within civilian areas. And I just want to remind everyone that Gaza is one of the most densely populated areas in the world. And when I'll use that as a segue to turn to you, Michael W., to talk a little bit about how Israel is framing or justifying the war and how we relate to that. So, Israel's primary stated justification for the war has been the need to eradicate Hamas from Gaza. And much of its moral justification for the large numbers of deaths that we're seeing, again, up to 13,000 and climbing, is that Hamas has embedded itself among its civilian population. IDF spokespeople have said, for instance, they could have avoided high casualties and destruction, but this was their choice. And it's not always clear if that was Hamas's choice or the entire Gazan population's choice. But this isn't new. And Israel has long accused Hamas of using human shields because of frequently placing their bases of operation within civilian areas. At the same time, the IDF also has bases of operation within civilian areas, from towns along the Gaza border to settlements in the West Bank to even its headquarters underneath central Tel Aviv. So my question is there a difference? Are both sides essentially using human shields? And does this justify the high number of civilian casualties in Gaza?
Well, I greatly appreciate Michael S.'s caution in assessing Israel's war. And if he is cautious from Israel, I have to be even more cautious from New York. So I want to begin by saying something about what I call the asymmetry trap. Israel has walked into a war designed by Hamas in such a way that there is no way to fight the war without killing civilians. And I think that is an intentional design. It is a strategy, because every civilian that Israel kills is a political asset for Hamas. Hamas benefits. If you ask the classic question, who benefits? Hamas benefits from every civilian killed, and Israel loses out in the judgment of the world for every civilian it kills. And it's very important to see this as a strategy. And then the crucial question is, how does Israel respond to the strategy? And some of the responses seem to me obviously wrong. The shutting down of electricity, the closing off of the supplies that people need to live, driving people south and not making provision for a possible existence in the south. All of that seems to me to be wrong. But it also has to be said that Hamas apparently has enormous resources of fuel, for example. It runs this extraordinary ventilation system that brings fresh air into 300 miles of tunnels. And all of that, since Hamas is the government of Gaza, and its first responsibility is to the citizens, Israel is being asked to step in when the government of Gaza refuses to provide for its own, I won't call them citizens, its own subjects. Now that I think Israel is required to step in, but it is very, very important in terms of the judgments of the world, that the world know that Israel is stepping in when the government of Gaza has stepped out, has actually refused to provide the fuel that the hospitals need and that every other way of helping the people of Gaza survive requires fuel. So the question, as I stated it, was how does Israel respond to this, I think, virtually impossible situation? It's as if the laws of war and the theory of just war have made it impossible to fight a just war. And I do begin by saying that a forceful response to the massacre of 7 October is justified. And the question is, what kind of force? And I agree that targeting has to be careful. I also think the search for intelligence and even the taking of risks in the search for intelligence so that the bombing can be precise, that is required. And I also think it's obviously required that humanitarian aid be available. How is Israel meeting this? I am not sure. The example that Michael S. gave, the 2,000-ton bomb used supposedly to kill one person, that doesn't seem right. And I wonder if they weren't also trying to get at tunnels underneath, because, well, anyway, I suspect from a distance that Michael S. is right in his judgment of that event. But it is so hard to fight such a war, and the question of who benefits leads me to think that if the IDF commanders are acting rationally, they must be trying to minimize civilian deaths. But of course, we also have to take into account the moral lunacy of the political leaders. of the country. I don't know to what extent they are governing the conduct of the war. If the conduct of the war is rational, then I have to think that there are real efforts being made to find targets and to hit them as precisely as possible. What we see on American television is rubble, neighborhoods demolished, and we are not told what lies underneath the rubble. We don't know. I suspect that at least some of the journalists do know, but they don't tell us. There is an excellent study of the conduct of the war in I believe it was 2014, which documents that Hamas was firing rockets from schoolyards and hospital parking lots. If it is doing that again, then some response must be justified, but how to respond, I agree, it requires not only precise aiming, but it requires the use of weapons which are suited to the task of hitting and that target and not everything around it. So when I talk about the war here, I try to be sure that the difficulties of the asymmetry trap are fully realized, and that the judgments we make of trying to work within that trap have to be careful. And what we should aim at most somehow is the assignment of responsibility. And I can describe how I think that works in a crude way, that Hamas is responsible for all the civilian deaths that its design of the war was meant to produce, and Israel is responsible for any deaths that were not imposed or required by the design of the war. And I can't assign numbers on either side, but I think the assignment of responsibility is crucial, and it has to be divided in some way every time we talk about the dead and dying. We have to talk about responsibility. I should add one thing. Years ago, I wrote an argument against proportionality because I thought proportionality arguments were being used. I don't remember where, in Vietnam or Afghanistan or one of America's wars. Proportionality arguments were being used to justify too much, because it's so easy to manipulate the mathematics. So I focus in my judgments about the war on responsibility. Now, I'll stop there. We have much more to talk about.
Thank you so much. And I think you should both know that the Q&A is very, very active, and a lot of the questions that are being asked there are topics that I want us to discuss anyway. But one of them that I think is a good segue from where you just left off, Michael W., and I would love for Michael S. to respond, and then of course you can add as well afterwards. But is really a question about whether international law is helpful to us in a situation like this. I think a lot of a lot of people, both lay people and lawyers, have been particularly frustrated over the past several weeks by, sort of feeling helpless and wondering what can international law, especially the laws of war, do for us in these kinds of circumstances. How can it address problems acutely as they're happening, and also prevent, future destruction. And there's I think a bigger question of is IHL, are the laws of war even capable of handling situations the way that they have developed since those laws were codified. And the laws were codified when they were thinking of the Civil War in the United States, or World War II, or World War I, II, in Europe, different scenarios, both in terms of who the fighters were, what the territory looked like. When occupation law was written, it certainly didn't, it seems, anticipate a 55-year long occupation. What can we gain from international law right now?
That's a beautiful question. Not for a lawyer whose toolkit is law. So I'll make an analogy which you, Emily, I think will appreciate very much. I am very frustrated by the Israeli Supreme Court. And I have been frustrated by the Israeli Supreme Court for years. And when I think to myself, what is it good for anyway? I ask myself, well, what would be the reality without it? And I think we should look at international laws of war in a similar way. And it's a bit different, because sometimes the frustration from the Israeli Supreme Court is that I think it gives bad decisions. International laws of war are meant to present the most fundamental moral compass of humanity, and humanity made a choice. It made a choice not, on the one hand, to allow the war to be an event that has no restrictions and no laws, and on the other hand, it did not outlaw wars, and it did not take the pacifist option. It very neatly tailored a right to use force in very, very certain conditions. And when you use force, to maintain a certain amount of minimum of humanity. Our frustration, or my frustration, is not with the laws of war, but I think most of us are frustrated by what we see as a very frequent violations that go without any punishment, with the impunity of violations of the laws of war. But then we have to ask ourselves, would it be better if we didn't have them? I think, to a large degree, most actors in the international community want to be seen as abiding to international laws of war. Even when they are not, they want to be seen, and definitely Israel is a good example. I think I am a very outspoken critic of Israel's way of conducting its wars, and the way that it violates almost every paragraph in the Fourth Geneva Convention when it comes to the occupation. But Israel would never agree with me. It would always want to be seen as if it does adhere to international law. And that effort saves people's lives. Even when it is cosmetic, even when it is when they are trying to outsmart international law and interpret it in a counter-textual and counter in a way that is completely absurd, they still want to maintain the facade of being acting according to the law. And that is a place where the international community, lawyers, international institutions may come in and demand more. And that is basically what is happening. So are we in a good place? No, we're not. And there are a lot of violations and severe violations of international law. But we have a tool that allows us to constantly push for more enforcement, to constantly push for more adherence to these laws. So I guess the summary is, yes, we have a problem, but no, international laws of war are not redundant. They are very, very important.
And I'll just add a paraphrase of Professor Una Hathaway from Yale University, who recently said, there's no accounting for all the actions that have not been taken by states and armies because of international law.
Much better. This is what I wanted to say, but put in a much better wording.
Well, that's why I had to quote someone else as well. I want to turn now to maybe a final question from me, and then to the Q&A. But the topic of genocide has been coming up quite a lot recently, and it's the center of many campaigns, both by activists. Also, there have been scholars, genocide scholars, who've come out and said that this is genocide, specifically looking at Israel's actions. Michael S. earlier raised the possibility that Hamas has also, or has potentially committed acts of genocide. And I think the term is being used both legally and non-legally. So I want to ask you, Michael W., whether you think this is the right term to describe Israel's actions and or Hamas's actions, and perhaps if we're not there now, are we in danger of moving there going forward? Big question.
I suspect that Hamas has genocidal aspirations vis-a-vis the Jews of Israel, and I suspect that there are Jewish fanatics who have genocidal intentions vis-a-vis the Palestinians on the West Bank. But I don't think anything that's been done or is being done right now is genocidal. And I think most of the talk about genocide, certainly in the United States, is simply propaganda. It's not the way we should be talking about what's going on. We should be asking, I think, the questions that I suggested about responsibility. Let me just comment briefly on the usefulness of international law. I value international law. I think international law is the product of Catholic just war theory, secularized in the 17th, 18th centuries. And my work has been another version of secularizing Catholic just war theory. But I did manage to write a book about just and unjust war without mentioning international law. So there are ways of talking about war that I think they overlap a lot. I saw that because I agreed with pretty much everything that Michael S. said. They overlap a lot, but they're not quite the same. And I always remember a remark by Jürgen Habermas about something that NATO was doing in Kosovo. He said, it violates international law, but it is morally necessary. So there are possible conflicts. But right now, today, I don't have a conflict with Michael S's version of international law or his application of it.
Why don't we jump to a couple of questions? There are so many coming in and we have limited time, but I'm trying to pull some themes. So one of them is a question about whether the Palestinian people, and including Hamas, if we accept that they represent them, have the right to resist the occupier by force. And I imagine that is both a legal and a moral question, but it is something that has come up, of course, recently, and for some in defense of Hamas's acts, and I see it coming up in these questions. Do you have a response to that, either Michael?
Well, of course they have a right to resist the occupation. But there are then obligations that go along with the resistance. Even the oppressed have obligations, and the resistance would have to be preferably nonviolent, and if it involved violence, the violence would have to be directed narrowly at the organizers, perpetrators of the oppression, and at no one else. So terrorism is not a legitimate form of resistance.
Yeah, I'm afraid we have no quarrel on any of the topics. For the panel, it might be not good, but for me, it's great. Oppressed people and victims of all kinds of atrocities have a right to resist them, but it does not absolve them from basic moral and legal rules. And so yeah, I mean, I think it's as simple as that. And yeah, and this is important because much of the talk in what I don't know how it is called, very progressive left, or I don't consider that much. Never mind. But much of the talk is about, decolonialization is a dirty thing, and people oppressed and being colonized and are striving to end imperialism are the weak ones, and they can do things that others can't. I don't accept that. My grandmother was a Holocaust survivor, and in her and she went through the Warsaw Ghetto and then hid in the Aryan side of Warsaw for years. And she wrote a book, and in that book she wrote one of the main challenges in the face of inhumanity, and I'm not comparing, is to remain human. This is one of the main challenges. And so, and we've seen a lot of inhumanity in our region. And the challenge of the other side is to remain human even in the face of inhumanity.
Thanks. I think that the audience is curious also to think about what can be done. So there have been many suggestions that the Genocide Convention be invoked, or that the already open matter at the ICJ, the International Court of Justice, be expanded to look at this particular incident or this particular conflict. There is, of course, renewed pressure on Karim Khan, the prosecutor of the International Criminal Court, to investigate both Hamas and Israel's actions over the past month and a half. There are calls on the Biden administration every day, including from within US Congress, to demand a ceasefire. What actions do you think can be taken? will there be, what will stop the violence, and will there be accountability?
I assume there will be a commission in Israel that will investigate the causes of, or the neglect that produced 7 October. I doubt that it will, and I hope there will be a political reckoning with the government at the time. There won't be a Hamas commission to investigate its conduct. And I hope that if there is international courts of one kind or another, that they will be as fair-minded as Michael S. was in describing the full list of crimes that have been committed on both sides in this war. And for the moral accounting, this takes place over time, and it has to do, I think, a lot with how we assign responsibility, who gets the blame. And I will argue for a mixed response to that question. And there will be apologists on either side. I hope the mixed response wins at the end.
Michael S.
Yeah, I will only add that I think it is crucial. Two things, I'll add two things. One, it is crucial to demand answers. Hamas is Hamas, but you know, they will not see the ICC, because if they're alive, they will be tried by, and caught, they will be tried by Israel. But Israel has to give answers too, and it has to be frank, and it has to open and allow international examination of its conduct. Because responsibility and accountability is based on knowing the facts. And in the past, Israel was not forthcoming, and it was not providing answers as it should. And it should, because if we do not learn from what we're doing now, we might do it again. And if there is no public scrutiny of the way we fight our wars, then in violations of moral principles and legal prohibitions is something that is more likely to happen. And the second thing that I want to say is Israel is saturated with genocidal incitement and genocidal talk, and an incitement to ethnic cleansing and deportation and all kinds of things. And these are not just Facebook talkbacks, but we're dealing with public figures. We're dealing with political leaders, with media influencers, with journalists, ex-generals, celebrities. And this must not just be stopped, but there must be accountability for that, because that seeks in. And it goes and it eventually affects the way the officer or the soldier behaves in Gaza. And demanding that this thing will be dealt with is of utmost importance.
Thank you so much. I think that we have reached time. If there's anything else that you would like to add, Michael W., before we close, this is the time.
I think we have covered most of issues. I hope that there is the kind of accounting that Michael S. just described. But it first requires a political defeat for the people that he's talking about, the religious zealots, the ultra-nationalists. They have to be politically defeated, and that's a matter for the Israeli people. There will be, I think, fairly soon after the war, an election. Government will fall, and the people of Israel have decisions to make. In the United States, I think the moral reckoning after Vietnam took a very long time, because it really didn't begin with the defeat of the people who fought the war. So I hope for the moral accounting, but I hope even more for the political defeat.
Thank you so much. There's obviously a lot more to be discussed, and I hope that we will have a chance again to unpack more of this, and most importantly, that the violence will end as soon as possible.
Thank you all. Thank you all so much. Michael, Michael, Emily, I'm going to stall for a moment because of those of you who weren't looking, Emily was busy answering huge amounts of questions that we didn't get to within the hour. So look in the Q&A for a lot of really important answers to things that we didn't get to. I really appreciate that. So thanks for everyone for joining us. I just want to mention December 3rd, again, for those who weren't here at the beginning, Partners for Progressive Israel has a virtual Israel-Palestine symposium, and the two sessions on December 3rd, which is a Sunday, will be devoted to a shared society within the Green Line, and it'll focus on questions of political, economic equality and other areas of equality. So I hope that you'll check that out. The link is in the chat, so you have a moment to click on that. And again, for those who missed the opening, I'll just reiterate that what's allowed for today's program to be free are generous contributions. So again, there's a link in the chat if you want to use that. Giving Tuesday is just around the corner, so no need to wait. And you can at any time visit progressiveisrael.org for upcoming programming. That's all for today. I wish everyone, for all who celebrate Thanksgiving, a joyous Thanksgiving, and I hope that we're seeing some positive news come out of Israel and Palestine today. So that's all. Hope to see you next time, and thanks for joining us today.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Thank you
you.
guys. Thank you. Most appreciated.
Thank you.